Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Henry Gornbein. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome as our guests attorneys Sheldon Larky and Richard Poling as we discuss some key issues facing us in the upcoming election. First of all, Sheldon, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your political background for our viewers?
My political background started when I was at the University of Michigan, and I became enamored with President Kennedy. And that started my career as a Democrat. That continued on when I moved into Oakland County in 1970, and became involved in Democratic politics, becoming a precinct delegate and a delegate to county conventions and state conventions. And I've been a Democrat ever since. Where I was a progressive Democrat when I first started, I'm now a moderate Democrat.
Richard Poling, the same question for you, sir.
Well, I started in the same election, even though I'm a few years younger than Shell, working kind of as a go-for the Richard Nixon campaign, which started me off in 1960, and I've been doing it ever since then. I've been a precinct delegate. I've been a member of the essentially what's the board of directors of the state Republican Party. But back in 1976, I got thrown into judicial politics, helping a mutual friend of all of ours, Hilda Gage, get elected judge in Oakland County Circuit Court. And I went on from there, and I, on the side, in addition to practicing law, was a consultant, primarily in nonpartisan campaigns, but also some partisan campaigns. And that's been it. Now, though, I'm more of an observer than a direct participant, as this old body has started to age.
Sheldon, from your perspective, how does this current presidential national election differ from the 2021?
I think the friction and disputes between both parties and the people that they're trying to elect has been exacerbated. Where there was in the times that Rich and I first started, the community, the commonality, and the idea of getting compromise, there's more difficulty today trying to find compromise between state and national leaders.
Rich, what are your thoughts on the same issue?
Well, I absolutely agree that the divide has become much greater. But more importantly to me, I think that as you look at the economy, inflation, border security, which oddly enough and immigration is a huge issue here in Europe. Some of the big changes are more the things that are hitting and impacting people's everyday lives, and whether things are going in the direction that they would hope or not would like or not like. But unfortunately, just as Shell said, the personalities and other issues are getting worse, not better.
I'm, from a personal perspective, I am so sick of the political ads, and it's just all you see are political ads and nothing positive, everything very, very negative.
Well, the rhetoric is all negative, where when 20, 30 years ago this is what I'm going to do for you. You didn't talk about your opponent. You simply talked about what you have done and what you plan to do in the future. Now it's this vengeful rhetoric that is, I agree with you. I can't stand the ads. I truly can't.
So you both would agree that we are much more polarized now than 4 years ago, sadly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Rich, question for you. Could Ronald Reagan be nominated in today's Republican Party? Would he even be welcome at a convention?
Oh, yeah, he would. But there's some reasons that were personal to him, in the sense that his personality, his calmness under fire, and certainly his sense of humor would have all have contributed to him being accepted. I think if he were somehow resurrected in somebody's person today, that person still would go a long way. but I mean, you forget about that a little bit, Henry, because it's been what 40 some years. Just how funny of a guy he was, and how quick he was on his feet to, throw stories out there, one-liners back, that I think would have enamored him to a lot of people. But the question, some people say no, he wouldn't be is simply because it seems like the quote unquote conservative movement has moved even farther to the right. And on the economy issues in particular, I would agree with that vis-a-vis Reagan. But no, I think he would still be nominated.
So do I. From a Democratic standpoint, while one of the contenders is a former TV star, and Reagan, a former TV star, Reagan knew how to keep his lips to himself and didn't come out with vitriolic comments. And if he did, they're always done in a manner to actually smile and you actually enjoyed it. I agree with Rich. I think Reagan could survive if he were here today and he were the nominee.
Rich, for our viewers, you are right now in Germany. And the question I want to ask you is, what perspectives are you seeing from Europe as they are watching, for lack of a better word, our crazy political system right now?
That's an interesting question. Well, I think the biggest question here as they look at what's going on is the uncertainty of leadership. They're nervous about Trump because they don't know how Trump's going to play if he's reelected, how he's going to do things vis-a-vis Israel, vis-a-vis the Ukraine, things like that. In particular, what's he going to do about tariffs, in terms of protectionism, to make it harder for EU companies to compete. But what you have to keep in mind is that some of those very issues are going on here now. In the last 2 years in particular, elections in most of what we would call the Western EU, there have been dramatic moves to the right, mostly being pushed by the issue of immigration. As of a week and a half ago, Germany now has put border patrols on, so you no longer have totally free movement between Germany and the other EU countries. Sweden, one time everybody thought was such a great place to want to live and whatever. It's become the murder. Stockholm's become the murder capital of the EU. And there was an interesting poll that just came out literally yesterday that suggested that this move towards what's called the AfD here in Germany is being pushed a lot by younger voters, the 18 to 25 range, because they don't mind immigration, but they want immigration only from other EU countries. They don't want it coming from, other parts of the world. And there are 3 countries right now that have serious bills pending that will be signed that would send refugees back to the Middle East in particular. The only country that's in Europe that has really moved toward the left completely has been Great Britain or England in their election a couple months ago. But all the other countries are all having the same kinds of problems. They put tariffs on China's electric vehicles, for example, the 100% number. The other real interesting issue that they think the United States is behind on is the Green movement. But the Green Party took it in the ear this last Sunday in the Brandenburg local elections. They didn't even qualify to have a person in their local legislature, the Landtag. And the Green Party has been taking big hits. And so you're seeing a lot of the other parties that were left-leaning moving a little bit to the right on some issues. And it mirrors what's going on in the U.S. The difference is you don't see, as Shell said, the vitriolic language and the calling of names and things like that. It's just, support us because. But they see some of the same issues, and they have some of the similar positions. A lot of the people, so it's the, I don't want to use the word agony, because the word agony is what I feel as I watch those ads and hear some of this, speeches and arguments going on. And it just, it's bothersome. But the uncertainty is the one word I would use to say how Europeans are looking at what's going on in the U.S.
And Henry, one of the things that we have to understand politically, the United States is basically a two-party system, whereas Western European countries are 3, 4, some 5 different parties. And so in order to govern, you have to find some form of compromise. And Europeans are much better at compromising than here in the United States because of the fractionalization. As Richard says, he's currently in Germany. There are 16 states in Germany, 2 of them former East European areas went to the far right. Yesterday or 2 days ago, the former East European state that surrounded Berlin went to the Central Democrats. So one of the political differences is the multitude of parties in the European countries, thus forcing more compromise than here in the United States.
Gentlemen, let's go back to major issues for this election. And first of all, Rich, what do you see as some of the major issues? And we'll hone in on some of these in more detail in a moment, but outline what do you think are the major issues?
Economy, and with that goes inflation, borders, security, sanctuary cities, homelessness, all that is into one, and wars. And I think part of what's popped up just literally in the last few weeks, more and more, but it's kind of the big heading of economy is this issue of protectionism and tariffs, which is coming under attack in the UN and other places. There's just a big report, I think it was last week on that. But in the general headings, that's where I'd put it.
Shell, your thoughts on some of the major issues?
Well, number one, I think, is immigration. As with Europe, immigration seems to be an international problem. And the thing that we have to think about when we talk about immigration is you don't hear too many people wanting to leave the United States to move to China or North Korea or Japan, China, Russia. People want to come from all over the world to those countries where they have the ability to prosper, to have safety and freedom. And immigration is, as Rich said, is basically a Western European and North American problem. So immigration is a major issue. How are we going to stem illegal immigration and make it legal? That's number one. Number two, the economy. Obviously, while the economy is prospering, there are holes in it with increased prices, and that has affected people. For the Democrats, the biggest issue for the Democrats is how are they going to get the 18 to 40 white single men who don't have college degrees to think about the democratic ideal? So that's one. As far as public safety, with recent statistics, public safety has probably become a back issue. Housing is another major issue that we have to solve.
Let's go to another area, and that is the Middle East looks like it could be blowing up. And Israel was involved since last October in this all-out war with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And now we're dealing with attacks with Hezbollah in Lebanon. First of all, Rich, how big of a factor do you think will be in the election here, especially in states such as Michigan and some of the other states which have a very large Islamic population?
It got me hanging in part because I don't know. I mean, it's when you look at it from the Jewish population, we used to say in Oakland County, for example, that even though the Jewish population was only running about 3.5%, you could count on it in a general election impacting the equivalent of about 12%. That was the old rule of thumb we used to use. And there's obviously a lot of pressure there. How things are going to happen, excuse me, the phone's ringing. The biggest problem is, to me, is the issue of what's going on in the Middle East and what people want, and where are, the people that are camping out at the campuses and things like that. How are they going to vote? Are they going to vote? Are they real positions, or are they somehow, falsified based on who they're paid, like some Republicans contend? Certainly not necessarily my contention, because I really don't know. But I think it's going to be an offset issue, and the part of the question becomes is, are they citizens in terms of Detroit and Dearborn, for example? One of those interesting statistics that I just found out from some of my Indian clients and friends is that it's taking so long to get a green card and then ultimately to qualify for citizenship that it's creeping up to 6 and 8 years. So are those people citizens? Are they able to vote? And I really don't know. Really don't know.
Sheldon, same question regarding the explosion in the Middle East for you.
All right. For Michiganders, it's significant. Significant because the number of Arabic, Chaldean, Islamic people in Michigan far outnumber those who are of Jewish persuasion. So from extreme numbers, this favors the Republicans in that regard. And this is an issue that will not be solved before the general election. As long as the Israeli prime minister does not believe in the two-state solution, this is going to continue. It will have an adverse effect for the Democratic Party. Just yesterday, or 2 days ago, the mayor of Hamtramck came out for Trump. Certainly, the Republican Party has taken the Islamic populations of Western Detroit and Dearborn Heights under its fold. So from that standpoint, it's going to be difficult for the Democrats to overcome those sheer numbers. From a standpoint of Rich talking about the green card, which is interesting because we have so many people in Oakland County, Novi, Troy, Rochester Hills, who are highly educated but still don't have U.S. status. They have green card status. So they have a difficult time. So the Israeli-Hamas-Hezbollah conflict will not end before the general election, and it will have an adverse effect for the Democrats.
Next question, gentlemen. First of all, we touched a little on the economy. If you're listening to Trump, the economy is in the worst shape it's been since the Great Depression. The facts and figures are clearly not so, but then you've got the fact that inflation was very high, but not as high as people are saying, but people are still having trouble with groceries and costs of living. So how important is the economy going to be? First of all, your point, Rich.
Well, in elections, I think either party, we were taught that it's the economy stupid was the motivation of the voter, and that's what you would focus on. I tend to disagree with you that the economy isn't that bad from the standpoint, if you look at the differences in the last 4 years. And I think what Republican, national, or senatorial candidates and Congress persons are going to be arguing is, I want you to answer the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And they're going to rely a lot on that in terms of trying to persuade voters. But the economy, to me, is ultimately the big thing, other than the one I would call as safety, which goes with this. We mentioned Shell mentioned before is immigration and crime statistics. Because if you want to talk in the U.S., and I can't tell you about crime statistics so much, but I can tell you here in Europe, a large percentage of the crime going on here are people who are not of EU origin and would come within the category of refugees. As I said, in Stockholm, you've actually got situations where apartment complexes have become cities that the army and the police have cordoned off and will restrict who can go in and go out. But that's not the U.S., obviously.
What about the issue of women's health, abortion? First of all, your take on that, Rich.
I don't know on the national level if abortion for the presidential race is the issue. I still think it is relevant as it relates to the election of senators and congresspersons, because there's a fear that the people who are pro-life are going to try and find an end run around what's happened in terms of the elections in most states. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shell, but I'm not aware of a single state that hasn't approved abortion in certain circumstances where there's been an election, a vote by the people. I'm not aware of any.
You are correct, Rich, and it's only the courts where they're trying to place it on the ballot in a few states currently. The courts are preventing it at this particular time. As far as the economy, Rich is right. The pocketbook is the major issue. And Rich is absolutely right. The question is, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And surprisingly enough, probably, Henry, you are, and I am, and probably Rich is, because we have developed our lives into investments and other forms of income accumulation. But for people who cannot accumulate that income, hidden in the pocketbook when you have to go to pay the rent, buy food, put gas in your vehicle, forget gas in your vehicle, that fluctuates. How about insurance? Vehicle insurance, apartment insurance, home insurance, they've all gone up and they are inflationary. So there's the major problem.
At least we're not Florida when it comes to the cost of insurance.
What about issues? First, Rich, I'll start with you. Issues involving Social Security, cost of prescription drugs, and medical insurance. Do you see those as having an impact in this election?
Maybe on an individual basis, but you've got to remember that a lot of employers are providing it. The unions, the UAW, ASME and all that, they have pretty darn good programs that don't necessarily hit the, John and Jane Q. Public in the pocketbook so much. Access is always an issue. And I think that could be, but I don't see it being impacting those voters that are going to swing the election on a presidential level. And in Michigan, I don't see it as being as big an issue as it may be in some other states.
I tend to agree with the Affordable Care Act. Millions of people who otherwise would have not had health care coverage now have it. And if you notice, no Republican or Democrat is now talking about reducing the Affordable Care Act benefits. Secondly, placing a cap on prescriptions, $2,000 to a person, has had a positive effect. So Social Security, I don't think is an effect other than the threats that it may run out, and there has to be a fix to that eventually. Medicaid is still an issue because if Project 2025 becomes implemented and places a cap on Medicaid benefits, approximately 20% of the population will be adversely affected. But I don't see that as a major issue in the federal elections at all. And frankly, it's not an issue that I'm aware of here in the state.
Let's go to some predictions now. We have about 3 minutes left. And first of all, Sheldon, who's going to win the presidency?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Who do you think will win the presidential election?
It's going to be probably the closest ever, but I think Harris is going to win the election.
Rich, your turn. Presidential.
Honestly, I don't have a feel for it. I think it is so close and in so many swing states that I just can't say. And in reading summaries of some of the polls and things like that, most of them are avoiding it. It's, I think it's that close. I don't have a prediction.
Okay, Rich, any prediction who's going to win the senatorial race in Michigan? Is it going to be Rogers?
It'll be slacking. It'll be slacking.
Pardon me?
It'll be slacking.
Sheldon?
The Democrat's going to win for the Senate.
I agree. I think Alyssa Slotkin has much more traction statewide. Rogers is a good candidate. He's a solid candidate, but Slotkin really has the background, and most people appreciate what she's doing. And her ads are more positive regarding her thoughts regarding immigration and as well as security for the nation.
Okay, next prediction. Sheldon, do you think the U.S. Senate is going to flip to the Republicans or stay Democratic?
No, I don't. And I would hope that the House still stays Republican dominated, because by having a bifurcated legislature, people have to compromise and neither party can push through a total agenda.
So you think the
Henry, I
Democrats
agree with
will flip
that.
the Senate?
Henry, I'm going to agree with what Chell says, but one of your other questions a while ago, the only way I think we can solve our problems internally, political and this divide, is we need a third party to force exactly what Shell talked about, was forcing the parties to come to compromise. And the only way you're going to do that is there's got to be a party that's created that fills that middle gap that isn't far right or far left, and can sit down and have serious conversations and come to some compromises and solutions, as opposed to, if you're not going to play football the way I am, I'm taking my football and going home attitude that we see right now.
It's got to change. Rich, is the House going to stay Republican or is it going to flip?
I think it's going to stay Republican. I think the Senate is also too close to call, but it's going to depend on if Harris has any coattails or not. If she doesn't have any coattails, the Senate's going to go Republican as well.
Sheldon, is the House going to flip or stay Republican?
House is going to stay Republican. The issues are bread and butter issues, and the Republicans do an excellent job on local issues.
Okay, you two are prime examples of how we can have a political discussion and not be argumentative, not be polarized, and the key is how we move forward in the future. But gentlemen, we're out of time. I want to thank you for being our guests on Gracefully Graying. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying, and of course I want to thank our sponsors for making Gracefully Graying possible. Thank you so much, both of you.